Welcome everyone to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter and I'm here today to talk to you about The Nevers Season 1 Episode 1. It's called Touched. So I will start spoiler free because it is an Episode 1 and I'll give you warning before I go into some more spoilery things later on. But as with many first episodes, I'd say more of it's spoiler free than not, just because it's the premise, it's setting things up, it's establishing the setting and the characters. And of course The Nevers has a little bit of a weird beginnings. Its history is kind of buried in a lot of other things going on around it, namely being that this is a Joss Whedon show, or at least it was a Joss Whedon show. He clearly did a lot of work on this first season. He directed this first episode, and he's credited as writing in the first episode, and he's created the show and so on, but he was replaced as showrunner just a few months ago. How late in the process that change happened, and does it really have much of an effect before we even get to potential season 2? I'm not sure. But from a personal point of view, this is a really weird, like, bittersweet thing to try and watch, but also to review, because I'm someone who grew up on Buffy and Angel and loved Firefly and loved much of the work that Whedon did, but of course it has turned out, particularly heavily so in recent months, that he's a complete dick behind the scenes, and that no one will probably ever want to work with them again. I mean, maybe that's true, maybe eventually they can do something, I don't know, but at least for now he's off the table. So it's really weird, because the reason why I say it's kind of bittersweet is because for so long I wanted another Whedon TV show. I was saying for years that I wanted a regular Whedon TV show to talk about, and it was kind of that thing where all of the shows that I liked from him were all pre the channel, all before. I mean, some of them existed before YouTube even existed, never mind before I was on YouTube talking about TV shows. So it's really bittersweet to finally kind of get one, and to be kind of marred with his real world stuff and all that. It wasn't really I wasn't really thinking about it too much as I was watching the episode, outside of a couple of kind of shitty sex jokes, which just kind of stuck out a little bit more than they probably would have. It's one of the worst things about the episode. But that said, it doesn't change the fact that I was a fan of most of his work, and that this is still a part of his work, and that this might be something that other people can carry the torch on. I did notice some other Buffy and Angel alumni in the credits, and the producer staff. I assume they're also writers on the show. That was Jane Espenson and Doug Petrie I noticed in the credits. So that's neat. So Whedon's replacement, just for the record, was Philippa Goslet, who I'm not super familiar with, but like I say, this was only a couple of months ago that was announced. Presumably this entire season had been shot by the time that happened, but I'm just going based on roughly when the timeline is here. I don't know if maybe some changes were made in editing, perhaps. That's possible. But so anyway, with that out of the way, let's look at episode 1 of The Nevers. And to sum up what it is, it's X-Men in Victorian England, or London specifically. It's a orphanage full of superpowered, mostly kids, teenagers, mostly girls as well. It's particularly focused towards women, but there are a couple of men who have powers too, that we do see in this first episode. And we even have a character who's in a wheelchair, there was a lot of characters brought up and names being thrown around. I've not learned all their names yet. But Olivia Williams' character, who we never actually see at the orphanage, she's the character that's in the wheelchair. I do think she's actually involved in it as well, though. So she's kind of in charge, but she's not the one that's actually running the show. So if there's any comparisons to make to Xavier, I mean, they're kind of there to be made. I don't think it's even an accident. We have them recruiting new, because they call them Touched, right? They don't call them mutants; they call them the Touched. And we knew from before the show premiered that the something happened on a particular date, that it's effectively gave a bunch of random people, seemingly random anyway, powers. Some are good, some are hard to control. It's very X-Men, and the opening sequences of the episode are two leads from the orphanage, which is Amalia, played by Laura Donnelly, who I don't really know from anything else, and Penance, played by Anne Skelly, who I also don't know from anything else. I will admit though, I was kind of thinking that she was not. I kept thinking that Anne Skelly is not Saoirse Ronan throughout because she's got a very similar accent, and it isn't even that dissimilar in terms of kind of build and hair color and stuff like that. I wouldn't mistake them for each other, but it was hard not to think of Saoirse Ronan a little bit during the episode. But yeah, so they've got powers, and they're going to try and like bring in this new teen whose parents are kind of scared of her. It's doing a lot of the same social commentary that X-Men has always kind of had, and it's maybe just heightened a little bit because it's in an even rougher time period. We have a villainous boardroom of like stuffy old white dudes who are talking about maintaining their power and the threat that other people having powers, and there's a conversation like halfway or so through the episode about I assume this is relatively accurate, that the word employee was a fairly new thing in England at the time, and the stuffy old dude's like, why do we have to change it? What's wrong with the word the employed? That's what we call them, the employed. And the debate kind of becomes, well, because employee can be singular, and you can talk about one employee, you can't talk about one employed. The idea that you only look at the workforce as a body of whatever, versus individual people who can have value, who have who should be seen as individual people, who are humans, who should be treated as such, yada yada yada. So the themes are there, they're thick throughout. The visuals of the show is it's a bigger budget HBO show compared to shows of this type normally. So you've got the time period, you've got the fancy outfits, but you also have the technology that's kind of a little ahead of its time in that one of the characters, Anne, Anne's the actress, Penance, she is she invents stuff, and that's not her power exactly. Her power sort of makes it, we see her to already be quite capable with like gadgets and stuff, but her power, which lets her see like energy and electricity and how it moves and flows, kind of allows her to leap ahead a little bit in terms of like what she can make for the time period. So it's a little steampunk, a little bit of the steampunk coming in there with her gadgets and stuff. You have that, so you've got a little bit of the clashing of tones. The dialogue is kind of interesting because there is some of that Whedon kind of pacing in the dialogue, and some of the humor definitely feels a little bit Whedon, but it wasn't as thick as it normally is. And I think the reason for that is because of the time period. I think by having to have the characters try and have a slightly different time, whether or not it's accurate is a completely different conversation. I'm not even suggesting for a second that it is, but it's like what you expect of a TV show set in this time period, because it has to kind of mix that with the his traditional dialogue. It kind of mutes a lot of it in a way, I thought, where I wasn't getting it as consistently as I normally expect it, which depending on your taste might be a good thing. But so that's a bit just a little interesting thing compared to, we have some villain set up in this episode. I'll leave most of that for spoilers though. We do have essentially, we have a villainous group, and then we also have a third party group who seem to be against all touched. And again, there's probably groups in X-Men that I could compare these various groups to. I'm not going to, but you could. So there's that. And honestly, like, I remember hearing the premise and joking that it was basically just X-Men in a different time period, and it really is. Like, the opening 10-15 minutes is so X-Men in everything that it does, that I was like, man, like, should Marvel be suing these these guys? Like, should HBO be should be, you're talking, and I'm just kind of joking when I say that, but I'm trying to get across just how X-Men it is. However, the grand question though is, is it any good? Is it actually enjoyable to watch? Is there reasons here to be on board with this? Kind of. It's not a rousing, like, yay, great first episode, like, I can't wait for episode 2, I'm like completely on board. I don't feel that way. There's definitely things in here I liked. There's definitely characters that I was starting to kind of like by the end of the episode. Definitely moments and kind of, just little stylistic things in the design or the action that I was kind of digging. But it does have that, it does have what I would say is kind of the first episode syndrome of, it's all about setup, and it's not a network episode, obviously, it's, it's a HBO show, but it has a lot of the things that I usually associate with a network show, in that network shows, by their premise, when you just set up your premise in the first episode, they feel quite simple or generic or nothing particularly new or exciting about them. You can compare it to a bunch of other things. You watch most network pilots, even something that I ended up being great. I always bring up Fringe as an example of this, but you watch episode 1 of Fringe, and it's perfectly serviceable at what it's doing, but it kind of just feels like, a bit X-Filesy, it's a bit of that, it's a bit of this. And I kind of feel that way about this. I feel like there's been other shows that have done the sort of more, Victorian era with attitude kind of vibe. Penny Dreadful kind of came to mind a little bit. It's not exactly that or anything, but mixing the time period with a bit more of an attitude, and it's HBO, so there's some swearing. Nick Frost is bizarrely in there. I completely forgot he was going to be in this show. He's kind of the king of the underworld kind of character, who is kind of a neutral ally but could betray them at any time kind of character. He's kind of that. There's also a detective character investigating murders that are going on, which I'll get into a little bit more as well as we get into the spoilers. But there's things I like about it, and there's also things where I found myself just finding it very generic, which is surprising for this type of show. And it's definitely, again, forgetting everything we know about Whedon now, but assuming I went into this without knowing any of that, and I was just excited because it's the new Whedon show, I would be surprised. I would be surprised still at how derivative a lot of this feels in a weird way. It feels kind of like some leftover ideas from some of these other shows, and then mix in. And he's even worked on X-Men comics. Like, he did an X-Men comic book run. And then then the Victorian stuff, and you have this, and it feels like this concoction of all these things that I wouldn't necessarily say is doing anything amazingly yet, but there's definitely some stuff that were fun enough. I mean, I'm in for, like, it didn't turn me away. Like, I'm definitely down to see more, and apparently this did really well. Episode 1 for HBO apparently was just the biggest original debut of a new IP, at least. For whatever that means. I guess that means not as big as like Game of Thrones, but bigger than other things they've started. I don't know, but it seems to have done well. And if it sticks like that throughout the season, then there'll probably be a season 2, and there's potential for this to go places. I will say that the setting's not my favorite, and this is more of a personal taste thing. I don't tend to like period piece stuff all that much unless the style is really there and it's really thick. And there was moments early on where it was a bit whimsical for me. I was like, this is a bit whimsy, this like, the umbrellas they're carrying around are actually weapons, kind of cute. It's a little bit too spy-like. It's a little bit like a cheesy James Bond-esque, almost, for my taste. Where it did kind of work for me a bit more, though, because my favourite thing about the episode is when we get to actually kind of meet the main sort of touched villain, right? I don't want to quite say the Magneto, because I don't know what our shtick is yet. I don't know what or if she has a manifesto, what is the manifesto? I don't know. But when we finally meet her villain, and the way she's introduced properly, because we hear about her throughout the episode a little bit, I thought her entrance and her performance and the way she carried herself was very interesting, and the type of sort of scenario she puts a lot of people in is very unique for the time period, and that's when I found myself getting the most intrigued and the most drawn into what was going on. Alternatively, there's a character named Hugo Swan, played by James Norton, who I hated this character. So far, first of all, he's the source for most of the sex jokes, because he's this kind of playboy. He is, he's waking up with multiple naked people. He's having sex at random times later in the episode. There's a joke about his dick still being hard after a couple of instances. And he seems to be involved in something really sketchy that they're just teasing right now. Every single scene with him, I was kind of tuned out. I was kind of just like, like, I wasn't really feeling this character at all. And this isn't even really to do with because of anything with Whedon in real life. I just wouldn't like this character anyway. He's just a bit too one note right now. And it's the sort of character that I hate in these types of period pieces. So I feel that way about him. That kind of stuck out to me. The actors, for the most part, though, are all right. I like the main two. I think both Amalia and Penance seem like they're going to be likable enough. Um, I would say that obviously Olivia Williams is a good hand to have around. We don't get much of her in this episode though. In terms of style, the opening, the closing, they're very orchestral, some slow motion, this sort of very emotional, widespread thing where it's going around all the characters, showing them on the day that the event, when everyone was touched. That sounds really weird, but you know what I mean. Like that the incident, right? That's kind of what the opening closing is. It kind of bookends the episode, and that was fine. That was fine. It was a lot. I mean, it felt a little over dramatic at the start, but it was a decent enough bookend by the time we got to the end. Honestly, the biggest thing going against this right now is that there's maybe not enough in it to really kind of set it apart from other things that have done the various elements before. But there's also nothing in it that I think is completely like a turn off. Well, I mean, okay, I don't like that one character, but for the most part, it feels like something that could grow into something. Now, admittedly, this is not a network show though. This is a 10 episode or whatever HBO show, which has had its story written out for the season, and it's got its beats, and we'll see them play out. The question is, like other shows created by Whedon, will I grow more connected to the characters? Because ultimately it's his characters that I tend to fall in love with. So it'll be a case of, will these characters have that effect? Will I be really rooting for Penance? Will I be rooting for Amelia? Like, will I be really invested in them by the time we get further in the story? I hope so. I would hope I would be, but we'll see. So I'll say spoilers then from this point on. So full spoilers for episode 1 of The Nevers from henceforth. I guess the big thing to talk about is the villain Malady, who is a touched woman, and as we see at the ending when we go back to the, because we see all the moments before what's essentially a spaceship. It gives everyone these superpowers by it's like a crop duster almost. It just drops all these sparkly, bits of glowing shit over London, and it touches various people. Hence the name, The Touched. But we see at the end of the episode that she was actually on her way to a mental hospital before she got touched with powers. And it wasn't exactly clear to me what her powers were. We see her eyes change, and it felt like she was getting more feral. So maybe she's got sort of more of a beastly kind of thing. Maybe she's just like Beast from X-Men, but she's got the sort of the anger and the rage and the brain to kind of make it more dangerous. Maybe that's what they're doing. But her thing, where because the other powers that we have, so I mentioned Penance has got the seeing the energy, and that lets her make things. Invent things, build, things that are mechanical, engineered, that sort of stuff. Amalia's power, I mean, she can fight. It seems that they've all learned to fight, at least the ones who are kind of in charge. Her power is that she gets glimpses of the future. Typically the very near future. At the start of the episode, it's maybe like 5 minutes into the future, and then she has another vision during a fight, or just after the fight, where she imagines herself at an opera show, and so that night they go to the opera because she knows she's supposed to go because she saw it in the vision. And then sure enough, that's where this incident happens, where Malady pops up and she kills the Faust. She kills the devil, and everyone's shocked, and she starts monologuing on stage. She's got a couple of hench people. She's got a little team of villains building up. She's got a woman who can do fireballs, and then a guy who doesn't necessarily have to be one of the touch, because he has like a sort of like arm minigun thing that he's kind of made, but I wonder if like he's got a power that lets him control that or something. I don't know. I assume he's still touched in some way, but you could theoretically, for argument's sake, this could just be a guy with a gun. But they hold this crowd hostage. It feels border. At one point the guy starts shooting into the crowd, so it's very mass shooting-esque, and feels uncomfortable in that sense. But it feels dangerous. It feels like a lot of these characters are disturbed by this, and probably one of my funniest moments of the whole episode, actually, probably the only time I actually laughed out loud, is when the chaos kind of ensues and people start running around. And the reason why it all kind of stops as well is that one of the actors on stage turns out to be someone who's touched. And her power is musical. She starts singing. and it kind of trances everyone who has been touched. Like it kind of connects to everyone. She's almost like a. I guess the way I would describe this is she's almost like a human version of Cerebro in that she senses all the touch people that are nearby, because we see like little bits of energy go to everyone who's touched, and it reveals a couple of characters. There's the kind of the nervous guy that I've not even really mentioned yet, who I think is Olivia Wilde's son or something like that. He gets the energy going to him. I mean, we didn't even know he had powers yet. This was kind of a surprise that he's one of the people who are. And there's a few other random like extras in the crowd that like are still sitting there entranced by this music, and it plays it very kind of like they're all just enchanted by this touched person singing. So Malady grabs her and takes her, and Amalia gives chase. She jumps off because they're in like one of the booths in the balcony, and she jumps off. And the one moment I laughed out loud in the whole episode is when immediately Penance, who was up there with her, tries to cover up. Why, I don't know, because like just before the opera scene, there was a whole conversation where everyone knows who they are. They know that they've got powers, that they're asking about it in this sort of awkward social interaction. So I don't know why they feel the need to cover, but it still made me laugh when Penance just shouted out, "Oh, she slipped," or "She fell." And I think honestly, I think a lot of it was the accent. I think her Irish accent really added a lot to the moment that made me laugh. Maybe I'm just having positive flashbacks of Doyle. I don't know, but it gave me a chuckle. But yeah, so she goes and fights, but she loses. And it's like, okay, she's not been. It seems like whoever Malady gets, she turns, because at the end of the episode, when Penance catches up with Amalia says there's still time. Like, she's only just got her. There's still time to save her, which suggests to me that Malady in time will corrupt other touch people, or something like that. And hell, maybe even that's part of her power. Maybe there was sort of like a line I missed or something that kind of hinted at that. But so that was kind of your big plot beat for the second half of the episode. I mean, that's the thing. The episode's like a full hour, and I think there's some scenes that benefit from not having to be cut down. But there's definitely other scenes where I felt it lingering on. A lot of that stuff was the stuff with Hugo, of course, because I didn't like that character. But there's definitely other scenes. There's definitely moments where I'm like, okay, they're letting it kind of, maybe just go on a little bit too long because they don't have to trim it down. I kind of felt that from time to time throughout the episode. I think you could have shaved 10 minutes off this and just made it a little bit brisker. Which I think would have, because I was kind of surprised with how little advancement there was by the end. There was a lot of characters to introduce. I might have even suggested like holding back some of the other characters until episode 2. I get why you want a detective investigating a murder. I actually kind of liked his introductory scene because we've heard of Malady at this point, but we haven't really seen her in action. But the detective is called down to the sort of where they're building the subway system, and he's shown a body of a woman, which already doesn't fit the MO, because the one thing we've heard about Malady is that she's not killing like prostitutes, because it's like a reference to Jack the Ripper, where it's like, oh, she's not killing, women on the street. She's killing notable, respectable men. Like, how dare she? That's kind of what the stuffy old white dudes were all going on about. So this already kind of rings a bit weird that it's a woman that's been found, and there's like been written in blood on the wall. This was the Angel of Darkness, or whatever the exact phrasing was. But the detective quite quickly points out that this is all bullshit. First of all, Malady can spell, and this thing was spelled incorrectly. 2, this is not her type of victim, it's not her MO. And more importantly, this victim has been moved, and the blood on the body is a lot drier than whatever's, pig's blood or whatever's been painted on the walls. So he immediately sort of starts questioning, like, who's trying to cover up their own murder here? Like, what's going on? And we don't really get a follow-up to it in the episode. But it was like a decent enough scene to show that he's quite capable and he figures things out. Maybe gives us another sense of the skeevier kind of side of things. I do wonder if a couple of the characters, I wonder if, even though, and I'm not just saying this because I didn't like Hugo, but I'm wondering if him and the nervous guy, whose name I'm looking for, Augie, I think, just at a glance here on IMDb, I think he probably could have waited an episode to be introduced. And I'm trying to think of ways to sort of pare it down a little bit, because when it cut to these characters, because they're essentially introduced together, where Hugo wakes up and then Augie comes in and they have a big conversation about him wanting to go to the opera and how they might technically be kind of trying to, like, because I think Augie's excited that our two main characters are going, and they have a conversation about like Hugo going there because he's not very confident when it comes to the ladies, and there's some jokes about like, what if one's like the Elephant Man and stuff like that. So most of this didn't really work for me, but by the time it got to this scene, I felt like we'd had the introduction to the main characters, we'd had the evil, like stuffy old white dudes. We've been teasing Malady throughout the episode for her big reveal later. It felt like maybe one batch of characters too many that we could have maybe held back and introduced next time. I will say though, there is a nice through line that did not go unnoticed. I mentioned that the villain's name is Malady, and I did at first think they were saying Melody, and that's particularly notable because not only is I almost said mutant, not only is the touched person, the actor from the stage that is kidnapped at the end of the episode, not only is her powers related to song and she sings to people and it kind of like entrances all of the touch people. Saying touch people sounds really weird, but not only that, there's also a conversation right before the opera when our main kind of, was it Lord Masson? He's the main one who was in the stuffy old white dudes scene. He is like, anti-change. He's all about preserving the status quo. It's a bit more layered than that, but I'm just kind of boiling it down to the bare essential of what he is. And he's, he earlier on in the episode, he described the touched as a sword, a blade that's already penetrated like our society, and what they have to figure out is who's holding the sword, because this is an attack on us, because today, today all these women who've been affected, they are maybe been treated as strange and they're being ostracized. Tomorrow will be, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it was like tomorrow equality, and then after that there'll be demands, or maybe it wasn't equality, maybe it was tomorrow it'll be like comfort, or tomorrow it'll be acceptance, and then the day after that it'll be demands. And he sees this as like an attack on civilization. But so he's firmly established early on in the episode, and then he's at the opera with the others, and this is where we meet Olivia Williams, and our two leads are there, the two guys are there, and the start of the scene's a bit whatever because it's just the awkward relationship stuff where like Augie's trying to kind of flirt and he's making a complete ass of it. But when he comes in and they have the debate I mentioned earlier about employee and employed and whatever, one of the things that comes up, and this is, I'm finally getting to my point here about the music themes that are kind of there in the through line. So you got a villain named Malady, which is very much like Melody. You've got the touched who literally sings and trances people, and it's all about music. And I feel like part of Melody's plan is probably going to be use her to like find more touched, and that's going to be a big deal. But there's a conversation here about harmony, and that did not escape me. Even before we got to the singer on stage, I was thinking during this scene, because I kept hearing Melody and thinking it sounded like Melody, that when he started talking about, there's a harmony to the world and I'm here to preserve it, it talks about. And, Amalia sort of fights back with, well, a harmony is made up of multiple voices, it's not just one. And then he retorts with, yes, but one's always on top. Typical villain nonsense. Try to like get the upper hand. But it stuck out to me even just at this point in the episode that, we're really going with the music vibes, and there's maybe even others in the episode that I didn't notice yet. But so when the big thing that happened on stage and the way it was de-escalated was the singer mutant. I'm just going to say mutant, whatever, screw it. She, like, I was like, oh, we're really going with this music thing here, and maybe it's just a case that maybe Melody's not even relevant to it. Maybe it's more just that they were foreshadowing the big music payoff with all the harmony talk. But I think the idea of all the voices in a chorus and the overall singing voice and blah blah, like, it wouldn't surprise me if this is a metaphor they kind of keep touching on throughout the season if they want to keep coming back to it. Certainly nothing wrong with it. from the get-go. Obviously, some of the other stuff that's probably worth talking about is some of the other characters that popped up with powers. The girl from the start that they're trying to get. I mean, first point is another group seemed to be trying to kidnap her. With these sort of masked kind of individuals were trying to snatch her. And then the other hint we get is this third party, seemingly, who I don't think are anything to do with Malady. We have like a mad scientist who's like experimenting on them. It seems like they were touched, who he's been manipulating, and we see him like, spiking their brains and stuff, and saying, "Today I'll just see how you hurt, and then tomorrow I'm going to figure out where God touched you." I think was the line it said. So that's what mentioned. You get the third party thing, but in terms of the girls, this one at the start. I did like the little twist, if you even call it that, which was that her parents think she's possessed, that she's like, the devil speaking through her, but when our characters actually go to speak to her, they very quickly realize she's actually just speaking a form of Chinese mixed with a little bit of Russian or something like that, and they're confused about like, why would she know that? So her power is very linguistic. She can't seemingly respond in English for whatever reason anymore. She understands English still. I mean, that's very clear. There's even a joke later on when she's introduced to the other girl who's the same age, who, again, in a little twist, when she stands up, we discover that she's actually like 12 foot tall. We have this sort of a giant, like, 9-year-old or whatever age she is. So, some fun stuff, little details with, like, there's, like, 4 beds that have been put together so she can have for her bed, because she's too big for 1 or 2 or whatever. She needs 4. For one bed's a quarter of the bed she needs, and that's what they've done. They've tied 4 together. I mean, that's, those little things are kind of fun. There's little periphery characters and periphery little ideas that are amusing. There's a couple of characters that during those scenes where they're sort of coming back to the orphanage, we meet a few of the other girls. There's one who has a boyfriend because they sit in the little kind of fancy buggy that's the best thing I'm going to call it, that Penance made, because their horse and carriage, they've got like she's built into it like a little speed car thing that comes out, and it's kind of that thing where it's going for the aesthetic of the time period, but it's obviously too more advanced than anything. So everyone's sort of oohing and eyeing at it when they bring it back. In fact, actually, I tell a lie, I did let out another audible chuckle. The doctor character, when he's basically getting through the crowd because they're all looking at the car, and he says, "Oh, this can't be that good. Everyone disperse," or something to that effect. But then when he actually gets through the crowd and sees it, he drops an F-bomb and says, "That's effing amazing." And I think his accent, again, this is a thing where his accent really added to the comedy of this. Or even just the way he dropped the F-bomb, because I think he went fucking. He said fucking, which I thought added to the humor of it. And I think that was the first F-bomb in the show. I could be wrong, but that may have been the first time that anyone swore, which maybe is why it was funnier as well. But I say doctor, he actually has powers. He heals with his hands, like his hands just sort of heal. And I think this is the first male character we see that has a power. So it's like, oh, okay, so some males have powers too. This is perhaps interesting. And, they have this conversation where Amalia, who put off getting treated for as long as possible from when she got slashed in the opening scenes, she, says, why are you with us ragtag group? You should be like the doctor who's on staff for like the royal family or something. You should be like the head doctor of the country with those powers. And he points out that, whenever he has those powers, people assume he's like some sort of voodoo, like witch doctor. So, it's kind of addressing how some of these powers are being perceived. Like, the fact that it's mainly women who are getting the powers, which is a big sticking point for the stuffy old white dudes. And then this doctor character, who of course is black, he points out, when people see me doing something like this, most people don't jump to, oh, hey, that's great, we have someone who can heal us. They jump to, he is working for Satan because he's doing voodoo black magic. And like, there's not a lot of his character in this episode. I like what I got of him though. I think it kind of establishes very quickly, like how the reactions that he's had from this, or at least he suspects he's going to have, and fairly justifiably so. And then Nick Frost's character, who is like, what do they call him? The begging king or the beggar king? He gives them intel about where new mutants might be popping up, but they kind of draw him out because they want to find out who this third party is getting their information from. So it's a bit of a power play. He kind of threatens them. He looks like he's going to cut off his henchman's fingers at the end of the scene for cracking a joke about how he didn't really do a good job of scaring them. But yeah, Amalia kind of says, "Look, you're going to do this, and you'll help us find out who's doing this, and you're going to help." There was a minor joke in here that I kind of liked as well, which was Nick Frost says, I'm only going to help you if you steal the royal jewels, the crown jewels rather, I should say. And they sort of look at each other, and there's like a beat that passes, and he's like, "Wait, are you actually considering that? Are you actually considering doing that?" I don't think he realized the sort of power they may have, or how confident they are in using that power. So I don't know, it was okay. Like that stuff with him was okay. I like Nick Frost, obviously. Generally speaking, yeah, it's kind of a weird. It's kind of a weird mix of things. Like I say, the biggest problem with it for the most part is just that I've seen other Victorian set shows, particularly ones that have a bit of an attitude. Obviously, X-Men already exists, and there's been obviously fairly, a fair number of X-Men clones or rip-offs or, whatever you want to call it. So there's not a lot about this that feels particularly special as of yet. But I did find things a bit more interesting with the main villain. I couldn't give a shit about Hugo's plot and his secret club that he's building. He's handing out little tokens to people, and seems to be building. So, well, I mean, at first it's like a sex club, but then he's also working with a detective who's like finding them girls. So it's all sounded a bit sex slavey, to be honest, from that later conversation. And maybe there's going to be a swerve there, but I already didn't like him, so like I'm not necessarily that excited about exploring what shady stuff he's up to be honest. So he's kind of the one sticking point right now, is I just have no time for that character. The other stuff though, the main villain plot, mad scientist, it's all kind of pulpy stuff. And I suspect that if this premise was done in a different setting, if this was in the future, if this was in present day, or if this was in, I don't know, some other historical time, Victorian stuff I tend to only really be into when it really delves into the horror. And that's not to say that I like Penny Dreadful, because the writing in that show just wasn't very good. But in theory, if you delve into the horror of stuff, I tend to get into it. And I mean, that's true for a lot of things. There's a lot of settings where I'm not into, but then you mix it with horror and all of a sudden I'm on board. But the setting on its own, I'm not super into. And I do wonder, like, how much more lenient I would be to how, by the numbers, a lot of it is, if it was in a setting that was appealing to me more right off the bat. But as it is, I'm definitely down to check out another couple of episodes at the very least and see where it progresses, if I grow more attached to the characters, because the main cast for the most part are not unlikable. Like Amalia and Penance seem likable enough. There's not like enough in this to really fall in love with them yet, but there is something potential there, and like a lot of TV pilots, you don't really get to that point until later anyway. You need time to grow with the characters. But yeah, there you go. That is my thoughts on the Nevers pilot. There's probably some stuff I missed. It was like I say, there was a lot in this, although the plot didn't actually advance that much. There was a lot of introductions to a lot of different things that they're presumably going to start playing with a bit more next episode. As far as a pilot goes, I would say it's a perfectly solid pilot in that it sets everything up. It gives you tone, it gives you a bunch of things. Maybe the one thing that it's really missing though is a good hook and just something to make it stand out. In fact, actually, one little tidbit I should probably mention actually is in the final scene where we cut back to the day of the touching, the day of the touching, when the ship comes in and all the sparkly things drop on everyone. that is interesting because no one seems to realize that it's happened. Like, they're all tranced for a bit whilst the sparklies are falling. They're kind of looking at them and they're all in awe and whatever. But once the ship disappears and the sparklies have gone, everyone just kind of resumes what they were doing. You know, people who were looking up just going to start looking ahead. No one starts talking to each other about the fact that there was a ship in the sky. No one talks about the sparklies. Everyone just kind of moves. And it's like they don't remember. You know, it's very much a Ben is glory type of reaction from everyone, where they just don't seem to know that it's just happened. Whatever caused this seems to have wiped everyone's minds, except one. And presumably this is because her mind is different and, you know, whatever, right? But Malady, who's already like half in a straitjacket being taken to a mental hospital, she still remembers and she's still looking up and she's saying, hey, there was a thing in the sky, and she's trying to talk to the people who are dragging her away. And obviously they don't believe her. But that seemed to be what the show was saying to me, is that no one actually remembers the ship. That the ship has erased everyone's memories of it happening. And except her, that it didn't work on her because she's different. So it was a curious touch. Like, it was the one thing in the ending that was interesting. I mean, I suppose it's close to being the hook that I'm saying it's missing, but I don't know if it was enough of a hook. But hey, there you go. That is my thoughts on the Nevers. So by all means, like and subscribe, all that stuff. It's super important on YouTube. It is the one way to make the YouTube algorithm know that you think we're worth recommending to other people, and other people will find us as a result. So please, to help grow the channel, hit the like button and comment and subscribe. You can support us, of course, over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV financially. If you would wish to donate as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your troubles, please go and have a look over there too. But otherwise, that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?